NetGain Networking Encouragement Training, helping snow landscape and all small businesses hire, train, retain, and engage the best teams to build those win-win workplaces. Are you looking to thrive at work? Here is your NetGain.
Welcome to NetGain. This is Networking Encouragement Training. I'm your host, Evan Tashwire from Jack of All People Trades. We exist to help snow landscape and all small businesses find, train, and retain the best people so you can build those win-win workplaces. So on NetGain today, we're talking about a very important topic here, which is moving from owner-operator to company leader or CEO, whatever title you want to call that. So when you're building from just yourself to now you've got a team under you, now you're leading people, what does that look like and things to talk about? So I do have Jeff Heller on here as a guest. So Jeff, if you want to introduce yourself, give a quick little bit of your background to the audience, go for it.
Sure. Thank you for having me on, Evan. My name's, as Evan said, Jeff Heller. I am the president/owner of Innovative Maintenance Solutions in Indianapolis. We're a snow, landscape, and many other services provider to our customers here in Indiana and over in the Southwest Ohio. Been in the snow and landscaping business for about 21 years. Been a member of the Snow and Ice Management Association for that long. I currently am the board chair for the SIMA board of directors and am a past chair of the SIMA Foundation board of directors. So have lots of experience and hope maybe I can share a little bit of that today with your audience.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Definitely look forward to getting into that, what you've learned in your experience. Also talking about, some of my experience and where it really crosses over. So this topic specifically is going to be for, the person who really started the business, but even other leaders and other people in the company can kind of help with this and coaching or, providing this as a resource to your owner, also supporting them. But we'll really talk about moving from that owner operator to company leader. So the E in NetGain is for encouragement. I always like to give one. So my encouragement I'd give today is be open to learn. And this is to anybody. It's okay not to know everything. And I think especially in this owner operator context, that's important because many times as that owner, you feel like, okay, you're the top dog. You're the one who started it. You're the one who has the vision. You need to bring people along. So you have to know everything. But as things grow and you start bringing on, say, a sales team, an operations team, mechanics, people in the shop, there's going to be people with specialty skills and experience and background that are going to know things you don't. And it's okay. And there's also going to be things you don't know because, the classic business book, what got you here won't get you there. There's a difference between, running it yourself with a couple people under you, one crew, and worrying about doing the job day to day to now managing multiple crews, maybe like you do in a multiple state territory where you're not in the weeds on everything day to day. So I encourage you that it's okay not to know everything, but be open to learn and be open to trust others. Anything you'd say to that from your experience, Jeff?
I agree 100%. My two biggest pieces of encouragement here is to understand that you aren't going to know everything and you may never feel that you're ready to make that move. But if you know what your limitations are and you know that you do need to lean on other people for help, then, it's a manageable step to be able to move from an owner operator to an owner.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I like what you said there too about you may never feel you're ready to make that move. And that's for anything. I'll be honest, even podcasting now, getting toward a year in, I still feel like there's a lot I don't know. There's things I don't know, but it's like you won't know them sitting. I heard this quote the other day. You don't learn how to swim by reading about water. So, you learn how to swim by being in here, by me doing podcasts, doing episodes, promoting, seeing what does and doesn't work. And that's the same thing for moving to that CEO, company leader position. So first off, from your experience, what are some signs that it's time to start thinking about moving from owner operator to more that CEO type role? Like where does the shift really start from your experience, both what you've lived and what you've seen?
Well, I'll start by saying that not everybody wants to make that move, and that's all right. You define success in your own career and life, and, it's fine to be that owner operator. However, if you're wanting to make that jump, the most difficult thing is recognizing the signs yourself. And those may range from, you want to grow your company, but you're unable to take it past your current revenue level, and realizing that it's you that's the bottleneck. The fact that you're ready to scale your business, but realizing that you're going to need help and talented people to do that. Secondly, and probably equally as important, is you're ready to make that move when your processes that you currently have in place are repeatable without effort.
I think
From the financial perspective, your margins dictate that you can begin hiring people. And then probably the last two are the biggest things that are hardest to realize. Number one, you start seeing that your highest value is not doing the hands-on work, that it's actually leading a company. And then secondly, your attention becomes more and more dominated by scalability, as opposed to just going out and wash, rinse, repeat, do your work, come home at the end of the day, do your billing, et cetera, that you did as the owner operator. So once you start seeing those signs, you're ready to start exploring making that leap.
Yeah, definitely. I like a lot of that. We'll kind of break down different things. I'll come back to what you said, knowing if you want to or not, and kind of talk about that from a strengths perspective and defining success for you, because I like that. But really, if I'm capturing the signs right, you said, some of the signs are you can't go past the current level that you're at, without hiring people, without putting, better systems in place. You're seeing the need for people, whether it's a skill set thing or just a numbers thing with how much jobs you have and the time it takes. Processes are repeatable. I really like the one about margins dictating that you can hire. And I'd probably also add to that is proactively start looking at your margins early, which I'm sure we'll talk about on the financial side, but really starting to build slowly. Okay, maybe you can't hire as many people as you want, but how do you start building that margin up? Whether it's cutting certain costs or increasing that margin, increasing the value, knowing, communicating to the customers, hey, this is going to have to start moving to a crew basis. We're going to have redundancies. So if somebody, can't make one job, we have a way to back it up. We have a way to make sure it's done. So communicating that. And like you said, the highest value is not necessarily on the hands-on, but the scalability side. So I think those are all good signs to look out for. One thing I'm going to come back to that you said about not every owner is going to want to move to that like CEO president level. Some might want to be the owner operator where they really thrive doing the job with like one or two crews under them, that they really, maybe they have an admin, maybe they don't, backing them up on that side. So I would definitely agree to that from a strength side. So I think my takeaway for people in that owner seat, really envision what does success look like for you? Do you want to be that CEO type? Do you want to be that president who, not saying you can't still be involved somewhat, but no, you're going to be doing things like going to, say, BOMA events, going to meet clients at their events, overseeing a team, doing strategic planning, letting other people do more of the field management? Or do you want to be that operator where you really enjoy being involved in the snow, the landscape, the hardscape project? And not that I think they're a total dichotomy, but kind of in general, where do you see yourself? One thing I'm going to ask Jeff is to the owner that might say, okay, I want to grow because I've seen this one before. People want to grow revenue wise, but don't necessarily want to grow process wise. They'll say, for example, oh, I want to be a $30 million business, but what they really mean is I want to make $30 million, but I still want to run like the mom and pop shop we were when we were $1 or $2 million. What would you say to someone who's in that mode?
Well, it's going to be a splash of cold water in their face, but it's not sustainable. You have to scale first before you can grow. And by scaling, I mean that you have all the processes in place to be able to sustain that growth. If you don't, you aren't going to grow very far before things start going backwards due to poor quality, poor communication, things of that nature. So, yeah, I've seen lots of people try to do it. I've seen owner operators and I think this is really the question you were trying to ask. I've seen owner operators that want to perform as owner operators, but want to do 10 million in revenue. And it's not sustainable. You'll have turnover of clients, turnover of revenue, and you're not going to be able to keep up with it. So unless you scale, meaning prepare for that growth first, you're never going to achieve the growth.
Definitely. No, that was the question I was asking is, so it is that cold splash reality that it is a change. And again, there's always success on, your own terms too. I met somebody last year who had actually scaled back, but had said, I scaled back because I wanted to spend more time with the family. I wanted to be more involved in the jobs. I didn't want to be managing as much a territory. And I asked him, I said, he's like, I know I'm probably not as successful as other people here, but I said, but are you content with your life? Are you happy with your life and what you do? He's like, yeah, I love spending time raising my kids, being around them. Like, then you're winning on your terms. And
you define your success, not showing up at a place like SIMA and seeing other companies that are doing 100 million while you're doing 1 million. That you define your own success.
Absolutely. And that's a good reminder even for myself personally as somebody who, still works full time, does some consulting, podcasting, shows up, but I like the balance and I like what I do overall in my life too, and it's not something I'm going to currently, as of recording today, upset that apple cart right now and say, oh no, I'm going to go into this so I can say I'm full time or so I can say I have clients. Look success, that's one thing even, kind of this will be thought this was a tangent, but it's actually a perfect bridge. I'm not going to, pay a bunch of money to go to all these different conferences to look successful if it's not that, serving the business and serving the consultancy in a financial way. So with that, talking about finances, what should a company leader know? So let's say you're that owner operator, you're starting to see some of the signs, you need to put some processes in place, but financially you're not sure where to start. Where's some good starting point for the guy or girl that, quote unquote, knows nothing or is just kind of getting overwhelmed? What's some good tips to get them started on that financial side?
You need to understand some basics of business. A lot of people will make that jump and say, well, I have an accountant that does that for me. Well, your accountant may be the best accountant on the face of the earth, but they don't know your business. Accountants, if they're doing their job, they're paid to look backwards, not forwards. They record, compile, and report information. They might be able to explain the different types of accounting tools like a P&L and a balance sheet, what they are, but they're not necessarily the person that can help you understand where you need to go financially. It's a tough jump to make. There are owner operators out there that they like the operations side of the business, and that's fine. If you're looking to scale, I would make sure you have somebody on your team, whether they work directly for your company or as a consultant, that can help you achieve where you want to go financially. There's so many people that will look at their P&L statement and say, my accountant told me I was profitable, but I have no money in the bank. And, what they're not telling them is that's not where your cash resides. Your cash, where you want to see where your cash is at and what you have, is in a cash flow statement. So the cash flow statement's going to show you the truth. The P&L statement's going to show you what your performance is, and the balance sheet is going to show you where your position is. So you need to have a basic understanding of how those three work. And all you need is a basic understanding. I offer skilled labor services such as plumbing that I don't know everything there is to know about plumbing. I've learned enough that I can have a plumber explain to me in plumber terms what's going on, and I can translate it in layman terms to my customer. I don't need to know how the watch was built. I just need to explain how it works. And that is the jump that the owner operator going to company owner needs to make with their financials. They need to know how the different tools that they have, the P&L, the balance sheet, the cash flow statement, how they all work together. They don't need to necessarily know how to compile them, but they need to know how to read them and how to understand them so they can make decisions for the benefit of their company moving forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really good takeaway that you laid out there. So for that owner operator, anybody in that position, really, if you're looking for a starting place, cash flow statement, P&L, profit and loss, and then balance sheet. So really looking at those three and getting to know those as a starting point. And even if you want just a starting point, is like looking up not only the definition, but how should you be reading those in business? And I like what you said, Jeff, of cash flow, showing the truth. Where is my cash flow? Where's my cash on hand? P&L showing performance. What did I bring in? What were my expenses? Where were my losses? Where was my profit? And then the balance sheet showing your position. So what debt do I have? What assets do I have? What do I owe? So any kind of tips with those three for, somebody kind of define reading them. So if we'll use your scenario. They're in a position where, they feel like they made a lot of money last year, but they're not seeing it in the cash. Like what should, maybe if you could rewind the clock back a year and they're wanting to come away with more cash at the end of the year, how should they be reading those statements in tandem?
Well, they're going to want to pay attention every month to the cash flow statement. That is probably, of the three, that is the most important. That is what's going to show them where their cash is going. Then they'll have the understanding of why they do have cash in the bank and why they may not have cash in the bank. An accountant, if they're showing, hey, you're going to come out of the year with, $200,000 profit. If you want to save on your taxes, maybe you ought to invest in a piece of equipment. Okay, yeah, that creates a write-off for you, but what if you don't need that piece of equipment? Those are the things that you need to have a basic understanding of. If you don't need that piece of equipment, then you're just asking for trouble in the long run, whether it be you get upside down in payments for that piece of equipment, or whether you run into a cash crunch because you paid cash for that piece of equipment. My feeling on taxes is I'm like anybody else. I don't like to pay them. It's my civic duty. And if I'm paying taxes, then I know I'm making money. So I think the most important document for a new business owner, somebody that's becoming the owner of their company, not an owner operator, is understanding the cash flow statement and following that from month to month to month, so they know where their money's going.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really good advice, is like you said, following that cash flow statement, knowing where your money is going. And I like the point you made too about taxes. I've heard that from other business owners is, yes, no, I'm with you too. I don't like to pay taxes. I don't want to pay more than I have to, but beware of that trap of purchasing something big just for the additional write-off if there's not the need for it. And there's also not the, return on investment for it. If it's just, oh, this is going to help avoid more taxes, but do you need that loader? Is it billable? Is there a job that it's allocated to? Is there, now obviously if you get a chance for an additional contract, we had a busy year in snow and someone says, hey, there's these additional sites. And it's like, well, we can take on, if you can take it on from a cash payment or, a financing side responsibly, and there's a return on investment on it, it could be worth it. But if, like you said, if you're just sinking that money in, oh, well, that's less I'm going to have to pay in taxes. Is that really worth, once you get into, and I'm not an expert, I know enough to be dangerous, depreciation, tear, maintenance, even getting the most out of it. So I think that's a really good thing. One thing I wanted to pivot to was the statement you made when we were just in a conversation, and you can correct me if I don't get the quote exactly right, but you said, revenue is vanity, net profit is sanity. So if you want to kind of break that down a little bit and how owners should think about that financially.
Well, yeah, it's, you own a business. We all have an ego. It's great to say that, hey, we cracked the 5 million mark or the 10 million mark in revenue. You can be profitable and run out of cash. Where you need to be looking is your net margin. So, I do some consulting on a program called Profit First. And that's one of our big sayings, is that revenue is for vanity, profit is for sanity. And you're not after revenue for revenue's sake. You want it to be profitable revenue. And in Profit First, we teach owners that, in accounting, you have what they call GAAP, the generally accepted accounting principle, which would tell you that revenue minus expenses equals profit. When we rewrite that, it's actually revenue minus profit equals expenses. When you look at that formula hierarchically, you've got revenue on top, then expenses, then profit. Well, what are you going to think of last? What's on the bottom? Profit. So we move profit up. So it becomes revenue minus profit equals expenses. You learn to operate within what you have. And that profit's always guaranteed because it's coming out first out of the revenue. And that's what we like to teach our customers. It's actually called the Parkinson's law, which really has nothing to do with the disease, but it's, you will use whatever time or money you have available to you to complete a project. Meaning if you didn't properly budget something and you have $10,000 to budget, you're going to spend that 10 grand somewhere. Same with time. If you were to tell me, Jeff, I'm going to have you on my podcast in 3 weeks and I need you to be prepared about this, and this. If I'm falling victim to Parkinson's law, it'll be the night before the podcast before I actually sit down and figure out what I'm going to talk to you about, because you gave me 3 weeks. Had you given me 3 days, I would have gotten it done in 3 days. So that's why we like to talk about, revenue is for vanity, profit is for sanity.
Yeah, I really like that. And I like that flip. We'll definitely have your contact info both at the end and also, in the show notes. So I would encourage any owner operators who are interested in that, consulting, that you do to, pursue that further. That's part of why we do Net Gain, is to connect people with resources. But if you take away just the simple takeaway of revenue minus profit equals expenses, is putting in there what percentage profit or what dollar amounts you want to make, because, then obviously your expenses, you should definitely know your numbers. And that's also a practical takeaway. If you don't know your numbers, you're not tracking that, is get those down. What is coming out regularly, yearly expenses, things like internet, monthly expenses, things like if you have a building or facility rent, for that, equipment, if you're financing, payments and all that. And then also things that come up per job too, to, make tracking that. And then, make sure that you have that too. And then also, I like what you said too about that, net margin too, really to, make sure that you are accounting for all that. So then too, I also talk about, I'm sure you talk about this more, but thinking about, job costing per expense, or expenses per job. So we'll take, snow, for example. So things like the brine or the de-icer that you're going to use on that specific job, the man hours you're going to use on that specific job, even the equipment that you're going to use for that specific job, you might have allocated to, say, one job, but then you also have your centralized expense. So if you have a software like a Yeti or, a LMN or whatever, then, that's allocated across your whole organization. Your, utilities, lights, internet, salaries for your office staff, are allocated. So should be allocated across, all your jobs. So kind of break that down for the owners, that are kind of maybe getting there, how should they think about expenses that go to jobs specifically versus, expenses that should be expensed out across the company per job, and how you've broken that down or helped others break that down.
As they would scale, I would highly recommend using a software program, and there's many out there, because they are programmed to force you to track everything. I was listening to all of the things you were saying that you need to track, and if you're trying to keep it in your head or on a Excel spreadsheet, you can't. I noticed in there one thing that wasn't mentioned, factor into cost, is windshield time.
Yeah.
You know, your software is going to capture all of that for you and force you to come up with a number for it. So I highly recommend that as you're starting to scale, that you start moving to more sophisticated software to help you do that.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads into my next point that I was going to get to, is thinking about, this is kind of coming from my time in banking. One thing I took away from there is the importance of modeling. So like saying like, okay, if I want to make, say, I'm just going to throw a number out there, 30% on this job, and we have these expenses, what is it? What kind of, models can we set up? And I think software is a big part of this. That can say, okay, if my expenses increase, let's say I do take on those extra loaders because I want to be aggressive and pursue some snow sites that I hadn't pursued in the past, what is that going to do then? What does my revenue need to go up to based on my profit margin? So, I think software is obviously something, but anything else you'd say to kind of modeling and how people should use that to kind of, like you said, look forward, not just look backwards?
Well, I would be looking at your equipment purchases as not only what ROI it provides you, but is it going to make you more efficient? Anything where you can gain efficiencies. And we're seeing a trend right now, and we've been seeing it the last couple of years that we haven't seen probably the 15 years prior to that, is equipment is becoming more and more efficient. You see the live plows, you see the metal pluses, you see brine. You can start making your own brine. That wasn't really an option 10 or 15 years ago. So anywhere where you can start looking and dictating your purchases on the efficiency that it creates for you. We're all moving into the AI generation. I think that worries people, but in our industry, the work still needs to be done by a human being. We can use AI on the back end to help create efficiencies, but and the software is included in that. Anything that's helping you create efficiencies in your job so you can do more work for less expense.
Absolutely. And I think with that, I would add, and probably was implied even in what you were saying, is really doing maybe not even official time studies, but knowing where your time is being sucked up as far as duties, both in the office and in the field, and where you can gain those efficiencies. Because that's, they always say like, if Noah's Ark's sinking, you don't throw the ants off, you throw the elephants off, So yeah. What are those elephants on your boat, proverbially, that are sucking up that efficiency and can, like you said, having that live edge, metal plus and Arctic Razorback as opposed to a traditional plow, just for examples, can that gain you some of that efficiency? Or is it maybe more in the office that, hey, right now we're tracking things still on, spreadsheets, or people are texting stuff in? Would it be way more efficient, to have the software and be punching everything in, whether it's the Yeti, the LMN, the, site photos, the field vision, whatever it is, crew vision, to and then gain that efficiency. So thinking about it that way.
And I would encourage people to, you need to look at it over the course of a year. These small inefficiencies don't really mean much on a daily basis. And I'll give a for instance, say you're running 10 landscaping crews, and the first thing they do when they pull out in the morning is head to the local gas station convenience store to get their lunch for the day, to get breakfast, to load up on bags of ice for the coolers, things of that nature. Well, it's only 15 minutes. Okay, well, it's 15 minutes times 10 crews. So that's 150 minutes a day times 5 days a week times 4 weeks a month times 12 months a year. How much money would you save, say, if you spent $4,000 or $5,000 and just put that bought an ice maker and put it in your shop? What if you have protocols in place that if you want to stop and pick up your morning coffee, that has to be done on your way in? What if you have fuel on site at your location as opposed to them having to go to the gas station to fuel up the motors, the weed eaters, the trucks, whatever. So, I guess my biggest thing is you need to look at these small things over what it would cost you over the course of a year.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it, like you said, and then you can see over the course of that year, because you might think, oh, it's 15 minutes, it's not a big deal. But like you said, if it adds up and it's adding up in that lost productivity time, and two, sometimes those things can turn into other time sucks as well. I think that's the thing about a time suck is sometimes it's, rarely just one. I know, for example, for the office worker like myself, the phone, you see the one notification and you pick it up and it's like, I'm just going to check this one thing. But then I'm like, oh wait, I have to email Jeff about the podcast. And then I'm seeing another app that has something. Now
Yes.
I've down 3 different, things. So maybe like you said, they're at that gas station, they're picking up stuff for the day, but then all of a sudden they see something across the street. Oh, I need to pick that up for my wife. You know what I mean? I told her I'd pick that up. They head over there, so the time suck sometimes isn't just that one thing. And I like what you said financially of being able to calculate where that lost productivity is and is there an efficiency, and I like what you said too, it's not always about buying something. Sometimes it can just be a procedural something like hey guys, coffee is either in the shop, if you're providing it or if you're not, coffee and breakfast is on you before you get here, or, you have it with you that you're eating it in the truck while someone's driving. So when we get to the site, basically when you get to the site, you gotta be ready to work. So,
yeah. And I do a presentation on that from time to time. It's you're bleeding and you don't even know it presentation. And it's about all of the small things that over the course of the year add up to thousands of lost man hours that aren't billable.
yeah.
But you're paying people for. So, I'll usually once a year, I'll be asked to do that presentation somewhere.
Yeah.
I do it as a audience participation because I think they learn the most if I get them actively thinking about it and coming up with things in their business that ultimately are time wasters that need to be corrected that they've just not even ever thought about.
Yeah. And I'll definitely share that as we kind of shift to the people side. These bridges are like working perfectly today. I'm from the city of bridges, so I like good bridges, and these bridges in conversation are just perfect. But as you talk about the people side, that's something that's really on my heart for training. Actually, I recorded with Martin and I don't know when it'll drop versus this episode, but I do have an episode coming out before the symposium talking about really how to get the most out of a conference. And some of it talks about that specifically, like you said, when you bring your challenges in and are able to interact in a training and ask questions based on what what your challenges are. And also even to be able to look at what's being presented or, one thing I had said is when you look at the agenda, like sit with your owner and your leader and say, all right, here's what's being offered based on our challenges. What's going to be the best for me to go to? Because there might be a great, session on liquids, but if you're not a shop that's doing liquids, like, yeah, it's good knowledge. It's cool, but is that going to benefit you versus if there's a session on, sidewalks and you're saying, hey, we got a lot of sidewalk opportunities or, how we maximize, that's where you're going to want to send them. And one thing I suggest, same thing I suggest for this podcast is, I always say, don't try to boil the ocean. So if anybody is listening as an owner, I know we've talked about a lot, have more coming up, but don't overwhelm yourself and feel like if you don't do everything today, right now, that you're going to continue to drown or you're going to drown or you're going to be behind. Take 1, maybe 2 things at most and apply them intentionally and measure that progress, because as you do that, that's really where you're going to find that, progress. And then from there, you can always think about adding things. And some things might even solve themselves, because sometimes as you start something good, you're naturally going to start maybe fixing something else. So as you start tracking, you might say, oh, well, this is popping out like a sore thumb. Yeah, I'm going to make a change here. So I encourage you with that. And then as we bridge kind of the people side, we talked about what should owners think about moving from that owner operator to CEO, company leader from a financial side. What should they think about from a people side? So when I say people, I mean, employees, leadership. So things like how to lead people, employee engagement, interviewing. I definitely have some thoughts, but I do want to hear from you as well.
I don't think I'm going to tell you anything that you haven't already figured out for yourself, but I would say of the three things we discussed, this is the most challenging leap. If you're moving from that owner operator to having employees. Now, maybe even as the owner operator, you had, an office manager that did your billing and answered the phones, but I'm referring to you're running multiple crews. You need crew leaders, crew supervisors. You need help. So in my opinion, this is the most challenging leap to make. And I mean, right off the top of my head, the biggest struggle that I think you would face, and you can overcome it. You just have to realize that you do it, is letting go. Letting go. Trusting the people you're bringing in to do their jobs. My belief is that if the people you have working for you are executing how you would do it 80% of the time, that's a lot better than you doing it by yourself and getting it right 100% of the time. So I think that is the biggest understanding you have to have as you move from an owner operator to a company owner, a company leader, where you're running multiple crews, multiple people. Other things that I think you got to keep in mind is you have to really have honed in on processes and protocols. Do they have to be 100% effective and correct? No. You can sharpen them as you go along, but you have to have that basic framework in place before you can start building a team. You need to have structure and accountability in place. You need to know how to handle conflict. I think one of the biggest things, and it was a challenge for me, it was probably the biggest, other than letting go, the biggest challenge was understanding that everybody I bring on board does not think like I do. So, as far as the people side of it, those are my big, I don't know if you want to call them pet peeve, but my biggest, what I would tell people they really need to have a grasp and understanding of. And it's okay to make mistakes. Just, you learn from the mistakes and you move on and you sharpen things. Communication's another one. The more people you have, the more vital that accurate communication needs to be. So just off the top of my head and just some notes that I made to myself, those are the biggies. As far as things you would need to understand and be able to implement.
100%. Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of the good things, and I think the encouragement I'd start with before kind of getting in the nuts and bolts for that owner moving to, from just owner operator to now CEO, leader, whatever title, is have that grace for yourself and be okay with learning, as you're letting go. You're not always going to do it right. Sometimes you're going to hold something too tight. Sometimes when you delegate, you're going to think you explained it well and you really didn't. And that's okay. I say the biggest thing is have the grace for yourself, but be willing to learn and improve. Give yourself that grace and also give your employees that grace, because I can say from someone who came in snow from outside the industry, there were a lot of things I didn't know and there were mistakes. I can think of our first real winter, just the timing with how we had prepared and we're doing walkthroughs, we didn't get through everything and we were kind of sending people out like, well, we just need to send you here. We need to send you here. And we did end up losing a client. And, one thing we did is, the group of us that were involved all got together and did like a postmortem and said, all right, what went wrong here? And I, took responsibility. I said, you know what? I didn't have these walkthroughs done in a timely manner. We sent somebody here who hadn't really seen the site. That definitely, even though they were a veteran operator, upped our error chances. Other people said other things that they did. And I was able to make changes on my end from a recruiting side. And here's the thing. I think if, obviously you have to balance because, there is accountability, if mistakes are consistent, continuous, have big impact, or, especially if somebody's showing they don't care to learn. But if people are caring to learn and they're doing those reviews and they're making changes and you can see those changes, I would say to the owner, give them that room to grow because then you get that appreciating asset of the person. And I always say that people are your only asset in business that can really appreciate infinitely, especially when working in ranks. You can have people that start as your, somebody just being your, I hate saying labor, but like, skilled tradesman or, engineer to moving all the way up to, that crew lead, that site supervisor, maybe an account management. Maybe they learn account management and operations and can really have that full knowledge, but they can grow with that because they do learn from their mistakes. They do learn from their setbacks and they can grow. So I think giving that grace as an owner, both to yourself and then also to your team. I like what you said about the 80% delegation. I've heard that too. And, knowing that there's going to be some hiccups and you have to, if you're going to promote internally, you're going to grow people. I'll tell you this, you have to be okay with there's going to be hiccups. You have to be okay with the fact that they're not always going to get it. I think, again, if the attitude's right and they're always about, hey, you know what? I didn't get that right. I'm going to learn from that. I'm going to do better next time. I won't sit on here and act like in my career, both in snow and other industries, I haven't made fumbles. Even as an interviewer, I've hired people that, had experience, but culture fit. I'm like, I knew it wasn't right, but I'm like, let me push them in an interview process and let somebody else interview them. Maybe we'll give them a shot. And what I thought about culture turned out to backfire on us, and didn't work out. And I learned, okay, next time you see that culture flag, that's a no. So I've made that mistake myself. I think you threw out a lot of good things about, number one, knowing it's the most challenging leap. And I think it's something I hope to bring more attention to with this podcast, because I do see a lot in the industry about the, equipment. I see a lot about, how to do the job, even sales, pricing, and all that stuff is good. We definitely need to keep having it. So anybody who's doing it, this is not a shot. This is not a don't do it. No, keep doing it, But my hope with the people side, I hope to bring more to that and helping owners to make that transition, and not just owners, even leaders themselves make that transition into, being that people leader, not just about telling people what to do. Cause like you said about expectations, one thing that I have a 4-part series I did on NetGain on employee engagement that I'd encourage anyone to listen to. But even if you're not familiar with that, basically to, put it in layman's terms, it's the extra discretionary effort that employees are willing to give on the job, or simply on Monday, look at it this way. It's Sunday night. An engaged employee is looking forward to the week and like, all right, I got these challenges, but we're going to get it done, versus a disengaged employee is like, I got to go back to that crap again. Or, I can't stand them. I'm doing the minimum to get by if that. So obviously you want the engaged employee as the tip.
Yes. My dad always told me that if you can't get up in the morning and look in the mirror and look forward to going to work, you need to find something else to do. And I say that because I think that is all based on the type of culture and environment that you work within. And if you understand that ownership and management in your company is looking out for your best interests, then it is great to get up on Monday morning and head into work because you're willing to give 100% or more if needed, because they got your back and they want to see you grow and move up in the company and be successful. And I think for me, the best conversation I could have with an employee leaving is if somebody came to me and said, I think I'm ready to branch out on my own and start my own business.
Mhm.
You know what? That is fantastic. What can I do to help you? And
Absolutely.
when you have somebody come to you like that, then you're creating a culture and environment in your organization that actually puts people and employees first.
And I definitely am a big advocate of that, and probably need to do more episodes on really career development. How do you build people up? How do you promote internally? How do you make room for roles internally, which goes back to our margin discussion. That's another thing to look at with margins is even internally as you have, say, maybe you do have some crew leaders now, but you want to say, how do I make that an operations manager role where they take on more and have that higher salary? How do you look at that in your margins, and where do you need to start pulling jobs for that to make sense? Because that person does have that skill set and you want to promote them internally. You want to make that role for them. And, you're not always going to be able to every time. And that's something that is obviously the goal is, in my view, is always to try to promote internally, give everybody the career ups they have. But kind of in football terms, as we both know, that sometimes you got those people who are ready to be the coordinator, and there's not a coordinator job. They're the great position coach, or it would be the head coach, and there's not a head coach job on the team. And in football, we call that a coaching tree. It's like, this coach developed these people that have gone out and been successful other places. Now, obviously, as a business for retention, ideally, we want to promote all them up internally and make them as successful as we can. But if the internal truly isn't there and we've truly built the culture and had the engagement, had the good employee training, knowing that we're building a coaching tree, because I've seen this firsthand, and I'd encourage any owners or leaders with this. If you really build a culture and take time for professional development and leadership development and do it well, it almost becomes a really renewable, sustainable type of energy, because you're then able to, okay, you lost that person who was, say, your operations manager, your crew leader, but you're also developing two more that have been in the wings that are ready to jump into that.
Exactly.
So if you can do it just like any other system, if you can do it and really invest, and I will say this, it does take time away from work. There is a cost to it. There's no doubt about it. But, there is an ROI to it as you grow, because again, you want a team that really looks to grow. You want a team that is invested. And, you also, I think, want to personalize it too, because some people might be saying, well, not everybody on my team really wants to grow. Some people just want to cut grass, so they just want to operate. And that is true. You do have those steady eddies, steady eddies, as they call them. But even with them, you still want to invest in some kind of training, recognition, engagement, even just to help them thrive the most in their role that you can. Like even if they're just operating in snow, what are you seeing? What drives you nuts? What do you love about this equipment? What do you love about the site? If you could snap your finger and change something, what would it be? And if you can make those changes, great. If you can't, at least saying, hey, look, I get your feedback here. We do have to put the snow pals here, and here's why. Explaining that why, and explaining that, your opinion was accounted for, because that's one thing that Gallup measures on their engagement is at work, my opinion seemed to count. And I've heard people give me feedback about that. Well, does that mean I have to do what my employees say? And I said, no, it means that their feedback is accounted for. It's heard, it's acknowledged, and it's also, if you can't act on it, you give solid whys. You say, hey, this is the way to put it up. We do have to do it this way. I understand why that would make your job easier, but this is why we have to do it this way. So you show that you're hearing people, because, and believe me, we could hit this conversation harder, but I think the, kind of people takeaways is, like we said, number one, know it's going to be that biggest lift, be willing to let go and delegate, and also be willing to, invest in your people and let them grow, and, kind of finish off both with contacts. So I would say for myself, Evan at jackofallpeopletrades.com, anywhere you can find my contact. If you're that owner who's like, hey, I want to develop my people, but I don't know how, definitely to me. I'd love to have a conversation with you, whether it's, some general leadership training that we can offer, or I'm also starting up a peer group for NetGain that's going to be a monthly, virtual call where I'll do a short teaching on something but it's really going to be driven by the people in there. And I'm capping it at 10 per session because I don't want it to be a webinar. I want it to be you actually bring your questions, get them answered, and learn from each other. And then obviously I have the individual consulting, but then Jeff, I also wanted to give you a chance to kind of, pitch, what you were doing and also tell people where they can find you if they're looking for that help on that financial ownership growth side.
Well, I'm out on LinkedIn. You can find me out there listed under my company name, Innovative Maintenance Solutions. If you're interested in talking financials and profit first, I can be reached at jeff@thegreenexecutive.com, or you can just reach out to me at my Innovative Maintenance Solutions email. That is the letter J, Heller, Heller, at Indy, as in short for Indianapolis, IMS.com.
Nice. Well, Jeff, thank you for your time. I appreciate you being on NetGain, sharing your expertise and experience. So again, we exist as Jack of all people trades and NetGain to help snow, landscape, and all small business owners find, train, and retain the best people. So it's been Evan Tashwire and Jeff Heller, and we're out. Weather, but you ain't gon' slip and fall with that. Why? Cause we snow fighters, we assaulting that. Get it, salting that. King me, the salting round. Clown brokers, end of the road. This a cul-de-sac. Blackout with white glove service. That's the coldest facts. Sparks flying from the start. It's a Goldberg match. Wild with the snow plows running. We be on a mission. How